In a side hall somewhere behind the outer walls of the Forbidden City, long before sunrise, a clerk dips his brush into ink. He writes down 6 caddies of pork, 2 caddies of rice, and candles, weighted out to the exact tael. He is recording tomorrow's provisions for a household in Chuxiu Palace. Hi everyone, I'm Amy. Today let's go through an imagined day in the life of a consort in the late Qing Dynasty. As far as I could find, there are no existing autobiographies or memoirs from any actual consorts of the Qing Dynasty. What we have instead are fragments, palace regulations, records from the Imperial Household Department, and detailed system governing rank, provisions, and daily routine. So, using information that I could piece together from historical records, I have recreated a day that shows what life may have been like for a young consort of the late Qing Dynasty. The year is 1853. You're a 贵人, a noble lady, a member of the Imperial Harem of Emperor Xianfeng, living in Chuxiu Palace, the palace of gathered elegance, one of the West 6 palaces of the Forbidden City. This is your 2nd year living here. Nearly everything in your life is controlled by the rules of the Imperial Palace. And long before you open your eyes, your day has already begun. The time is 寅时, just after 3 in the morning. You're still asleep, but the palace is not. In the Imperial Household Department, a clerk has already assigned the rations that your household will receive today. This ration is called your gongfen, and it isn't just food. The palace divides it into 3 categories: a fixed daily allowance, an annual grant of silver and cloth and fur, and something called pugong, which were the furniture and household goods placed in your rooms when you arrived. And these rations also include all of the supplies that your household would need, from candles to charcoal. Some of the furniture and room furnishings are nice, but none of it actually belonged to you. The pugong belonged to the palace, and could be taken away or exchanged at any time. As a noble lady, you were assigned 4 palace maids, and your room is furnished with exactly 72 pieces, tin and copper vessels, along with 42 pieces of porcelain. You needed to make it at least 1 rank higher to receive silver vessels, and at least 2 ranks higher to be able to use gold-plated vessels. Only the Empress and Empress Dowager are allowed to use solid gold vessels. You don't have a palace of your own either. Instead, you're assigned to live in Chuxiu Palace with 3 other consorts: Noble Lady Yi, Noble Lady Lan, and Noble Lady Li. And even the room you sleep in isn't truly yours. If you're moved, everything stays behind. 2 of your palace maids slip in before there's any color in the sky and light a single lamp. A brazier is still burning in the corner of the room, fed with charcoals from the household's own winter stock. One of your maid is responsible for checking it and filling it with charcoal throughout the night. Normally, you will be able to sleep for about 2 more hours, but today is a special day. It's the winter solstice, and you need to wake up earlier. You open your eyes before the maids even reach your bed. You sit up and think about what you need to wear for the day. Today, you need to dress better than you normally do, but the actual choices are limited. There are restrictions of color and fabric based on your rank, and only the highest ranks can use certain colors and materials such as yellow, gold, and pearl-inlaid robes. Last year, Emperor Xianfeng issued a memo stating that many consorts have been dressing too lavishly for their clothes. He is concerned that displays of extravagance went against traditional customs of frugality and banned casual use of certain luxuries, such as kingfisher feathers and jade earrings. Many of the consorts that you could see did not strictly follow this memo, though, and still dressed quite fancy. You are not brave enough to ignore the rules, so you usually stick to more muted outfits. But today is different. Your nicest robes are brought out from wardrobe. One maid holds a pale blue against plum, and you nod toward the blue. The maid fastens the blue silk robe closed and dresses you layer by layer to match. One of your maids lights a stick of incense before starting on your hair. By the time your hair is done, the room already smells faintly of sandalwood. When you catch yourself in the small mirror propped against the wall, you look exactly like what you're supposed to look like. proper, and correct, but nothing that will really stand out. Somewhere past the wall, the city's own drum towers are still working through the final watch of the night. The time is Mao Shi, just after 5 in the morning. You move to the sitting room at the front of your own quarters, still warm from the brazier that's been going since before you woke. By the time you sit down, your breakfast is already there, carried over by one of your maids while you were still being dressed. Your breakfast is a bowl of rice porridge, still steaming, and beside it, a small pot set over a low flame, pork and tofu simmering together in a thin broth. It's quick and hot, and gets you through the cold. Some pickled cabbage sits untouched to the side. Nothing on the table is fancy, but every ingredient you're given to eat came from the same list a clerk filled out for you hours before you woke up. And the pork logged against your household isn't all for you to eat. Your ration needs to support your entire household, which means you and the 4 maids assigned to you. And some of the leftovers can be used as gifts. Partway through breakfast, a runner passes your doorway carrying a small covered box. Whenever the emperor finishes a meal of his own, whatever's left over sometimes gets sent out afterward as a gift, by name, to particular women. You watch the runner's footstep fade towards someone else's door. Your name isn't on today's list of consorts to receive gifts, and it probably won't be on tomorrow's either. Still, what's in front of you is more than most people beyond these walls will ever see on a plate. Most families outside of the palace can only afford meat about 20 times in a single year, and you haven't gone hungry once since you arrived in the Forbidden City. You finish eating, there's somewhere you're expected to be, and you can't be late. You step out into the cold, holding a copper hand warmer in your hands. The time is Chen Shi, just after 7 in the morning. A eunuch is already waiting outside your quarters. The morning audience is usually a brief daily ceremony with the Empress at Zhongcui Palace. Every consort is expected to appear before the senior woman of the inner court, according to her rank. It doesn't take long. You bow when it's your turn, and mostly wait to see if there were any special announcements or instructions from the Empress. And after that, you head back to your own rooms, and the day actually starts. But today is different. Today is Dongzhi, the winter solstice, and you're expected at Shoukang Palace, where Consort Dowager Kangzi will receive the court's greetings. Normally, the formal greetings should be presented to the Empress Dowager, but the emperor had not officially named an Empress Dowager since ascending the throne. Rumors say that it is because he was honoring his deceased mother, Empress Xiaoquanchen, but you don't know anything about that. The eunuch leads the way out, through the courtyard gate and along a covered walkway, a fur-lined cloak over your silk, keeping most of the outdoor cold off during the walk. You reach the hall well before anything actually begins, and hand your cloak to your maid once you're inside. Everyone is dressed in their formal court dress, based on palace regulation. Empress Niu Hulu is wearing her winter court robe beneath an embroidered court vest with gold edges. Around her neck hang 3 strands of court beads, and on her head is the winter court crown reserved for her rank alone, with a single large eastern pearl set at the very peak. 7 gold phoenixes worked around it, each one decorated with 9 more pearls, and a long, hanging tail of pearls swayed against her shoulders. Over 300 of them in total. Imperial Concubine Yun is also dressed in full court robes, with her own court necklace and winter court crown. But her crown is a much simpler version, with 5 gold pheasants instead of phoenixes, each decorated with fewer pearls, and hanging tail behind her crown carries fewer than 200 pearls. But a noble lady wasn't allowed to wear any of those. In fact, you didn't even have a formal court dress, wearing your finest ordinary silk instead. You shift your weight from one foot to the other when nobody is looking, careful not to move enough for anyone to actually notice. Only once everyone is finally in position does the kneeling start. You go down when a woman ahead of you does. 6 bows, 3 kneelings, 3 prostrations, aimed at Consort Dowager Kangzi. A quiet signal from behind tells you that you've risen a breath too soon, and you settle back down without turning to see who sent it. Heat rises in your face from embarrassment, but nobody explains the mistakes out loud. Once the bows to Consort Dowager Kangzi are finished, the Empress kneels again to present a scepter. You kneel with her from where you are, before everyone rises and the procession reforms. You're led out through a different gate than the one you came in by, toward Qianting Palace, where the emperor himself will receive the same bows all over again. By the time the procession finally starts back toward Chuxiu Palace, the sun is well up over the walls, and there's still most of a very long day ahead of you. The time is 午时, just after 11 in the morning. Back at Chuxiu Palace, your maids help you change out of your silk robe and back into your everyday clothes. With the room's brazier already built back up, you've barely sat down where a eunuch arrives at your door, carrying a small gift from another consort's household. Receiving it isn't as simple as it sounds. Something will eventually have to go back the other way. The messenger himself expects a tip before he leaves. One small kindness turns into 3 favors that need to be returned before you've even had time to be grateful for it. You always need to keep track, tallying what comes in, what goes out, and what's owed to whom. It barely balances in your favor. A single festival can eat through more silver than you have coming in that month, once every gift is matched with a return gift and every messenger sent your way is tipped for the trouble. None of the silver was ever entirely yours to hold on to in the first place. The palace rules were clear. All of the silver and gifts that you receive are granted by the emperor and should be used only as needed. You are not even allowed to send your money to your own family outside the palace. The eunuch at your door bows once and disappears down the corridor. You sit back down, already turning over in your head what you'll owe by the end of the week. You pull out your own small ledger and go through it line by line. A maid lights a new stick of incense near the window while you work through the ledger. Then you take out a sheet of practice paper to copy out a line of poetry that you recently learned. It's time to practice your calligraphy. Your calligraphy is nowhere near as good as noble lady Lan. She always says the only way to get better is to practice. By the time you set the brush down, the light outside has shifted. The time is 未时, just after 1 in the afternoon. You sit by the window with a square of unfinished silk stretched across your lap, working a border of small flowers along one edge, meant eventually to become a pouch, something to send along the next time you owe someone a gift back. A maid comes in carrying a lacquer tray with tea. Beside the tea is a shallow dish of fruit, a handful of roasted melon seeds, and a small plate of sesame cakes cut into quarters. She sets the whole tray down within reach, pours you some hot tea into a small covered cup, and steps back before leaving the room. You barely look up, and your needle keeps moving. Your maid returns a short while later to refill a water basin. She mentions that a visit has been granted in the palace today. Apparently, a mother is coming in from outside the palace to see her daughter for a few hours. You keep stitching, but the needle slows. You think about your own mother outside the palace walls, but you aren't allowed to leave the palace and wouldn't be able to go visit her. Your family could, in theory, visit you, but only with the emperor's approval, and even then, only under very specific terms. And even with approval, only the approved relative will be allowed to visit you. Approved visits are strictly regulated with assigned gates to use and specific visiting hours. And all of this will be under the strict supervision of supervising eunuchs. One of the circumstances that would permit a visit would be pregnancy. If you got pregnant, your own birth mother would be permitted inside the palace to look after you. You wonder how your mother is doing. You hope that she is doing well. Passing a message outside the palace is possible, but never simple. A eunuch leaving on an errand might carry a few words home for you if you paid him enough for the trouble. But even then, you have no way of knowing if he actually delivered them, or if you would receive a reply back. You've tried it twice since you arrived, and both times you waited weeks and heard nothing back at all. Earlier this week, one of the maids mentioned soldiers fighting somewhere south of the capital. An uprising, she called it, though she didn't seem to know much more than that herself. You don't know if it's serious. You don't know how close it might come, or what it would mean for your own family if it did. Nobody tells you these things directly. You only ever get pieces passed along by someone who heard it from someone else. You don't know if this uprising is real, but it's scary to think about. You pick the needle back up. The tea's gone cold by the time you think to reach for it. The time is 申时, just after 3 in the afternoon. Needlework fills a good part of your day. Sometimes reading does too. But today, you want to get more needlework done. Your needlework can be used as a kind of currency too. A finished piece can travel places you can't. A small embroidered piece passed up to a senior consort ahead of her birthday. Some set aside to reward servants at New Year. And some kept for yourself and never given to anyone at all. It's one of the only things you can do that starts and ends as your own decision. You set the needlework aside and head over to Noble Lady Lan's room, where she and Noble Lady Li are already at a table with a deck of paper cards between them. The 3 of you have spent many afternoons like this together. A maid pours the tea before the first hand gets dealt, and Noble Lady Lan deals out the cards. Noble Lady Li complains, the way she always does, about losing the first round. Then she lowers her voice and says she heard Noble Lady Yi hasn't left her own room in days. Not for meals, not for anything, just sitting in there since her demotion happened. Just a few months ago, Noble Lady Yi was actually the principal resident and highest-ranked woman in Chuxiu Palace as Imperial Concubine Ying. But then she got demoted and lost her honorific for reasons that were not explained to you. And she is a noble lady now, just like you. Noble Lady Lan quickly shushes her, glancing toward the door before she does it. This isn't a safe thing to be talking about, not even quietly. Not even between just the 3 of you. Nobody says anything for a moment. Then Noble Lady Li deals the next round like nothing happened, though she doesn't bring it up again. You play several rounds straight through, losing only 2 of them, before it's time for dinner. You send your maid to the small shared kitchen space attached to the quarters. It is a simple kitchen, nowhere close to what a senior consort's own kitchen might be like. You've heard that some senior consorts had their own private kitchens, run independently from the palace kitchen system, instead of sharing a small stove the way that you do, and they could be staffed by a famous chef who would even be known outside of the Forbidden City. You wonder if you could ever have such a kitchen one day. While your maid is checking on dinner, Noble Lady Li's mood swings straight back up. She says that she heard that the Emperor and the Empress will be watching one of the Winter Solstice opera performances today. I wonder what they'll perform. I hope it's the Romance of the Western Chamber, she wonders out loud. She gets really excited about the show and begins to tell you what it would be all about, even though everyone already knows the story. Noble Lady Lan says it doesn't matter since the performance is not for them. But that doesn't slow Noble Lady Li down at all. Maybe we can hear it from the courtyard, she continues loudly. Noble Lady Lan just shrugs. Just like breakfast, dinner is made from what the day's ration allows. Pork, rice, tofu, sweet bean sauce, vinegar, whatever vegetable came through that morning. Tonight, it goes into a single pot instead of separate dishes. Everything simmering together over the shared stove. Pork sliced thin, tofu cut into cubes, the last of the vegetables from the ration cooking down soft in a broth gone dark from the sauce. Once the weather turns cold, a pot like this becomes a common sight at the table, along with a small plate of the pickled cabbage from this morning. By the time the pot arrives, none of you feels like splitting up to eat in separate rooms. You stay right where you are in Noble Lady Lan's room. It isn't much, but enjoying a meal with friends. It is the best part of the day. The time is 酉时, just after 5 in the evening. Back in your own room, a sheet of paper is waiting by the window. A single plum branch drawn across it in plain black ink. It's a 9-9 cold dispelling diagram, a way of counting the days of winter, one petal at a time. 81 pale petals wait to be filled in, one for each day between today and the arrival of spring. You dip a small brush into red pigment and color in the first one, a splash of red against the white paper. You set the paper aside to dry. This is your second branch. You still have the one that you filled in last year, hidden away in one of your drawers. You are not sure why you kept it. Maybe it's a reminder of how long you had been in the palace. You pick up your unfinished embroidery, the same pouch you started earlier in the day, the one you're planning to send along the next time you owe someone a gift. A maid checks the brazier and adds another piece of charcoal. Then she sets a lamp down closer to where you're working. Since the light's already going, even though it isn't properly evening yet. Today is one of the shortest days of the year. The embroidery is slow work, and you're not particularly good at it yet. So most of the next hour goes into pulling out stitches that come out wrong and starting them again. At some point, the maid mentions that banner soldiers have begun practicing for their ice skating performance for the emperor in a few weeks. Maybe we'll get to see them practicing one of these days, she says. You think about it for a moment. But it's going to be cold, and the walk to Taiye Pool is quite far, and you would need special permission to go anyways, so probably not. You're halfway through pulling out yet another stitch when a eunuch passes your door, without stopping. He continues on to Noble Lady Li's room, further down the corridor, and knocks. You can't hear what's said, but you know that the emperor has summoned Noble Lady Li to his chamber for tonight. A little while later, Noble Lady Li's maids start moving between her room and the washroom, carrying water and carrying a change of clothes. Your maid goes back to what she was doing without a word, and you go back to the pouch in your lap. You don't talk about what is happening, and you don't need to. The eunuchs have been coming to summon Noble Lady Li a lot lately, for Noble Lady Lan too. Definitely more than once just this past month. You try to remember the last time you were summoned, and it's been a while. You're not jealous exactly. At least that's what you tell yourself. It's just another thing in the palace that gets decided somewhere else by someone else. You pull out another cricket stitch and start it again. The time is 戌时, just after 7 in the evening. A maid brings in a small bowl of warm porridge. It is thinner than what you had for breakfast, because it's meant to hold you over rather than fill you up. You eat it slowly, still thinking about the pouch in your lap from earlier. And then it is time for your bath. Heated water is carried in, poured out into a basin barely big enough to crouch in. Your maids work quickly, unfastening the outer robe first, then the layers underneath it. Each piece is handed off and folded before the next one comes free. Once you're actually in the water, you stay there for a while. The warmth works into you slowly, and for a few minutes, there's just the heat and the quiet. You're still in the water when you hear it. Some shuffling sounds from the courtyard, and you see shadows moving against the window. Your maid glances towards the door, but doesn't get up. It sounds like Noble Lady Li has returned from her visit to the emperor. You hear a door open and close, and then the courtyard is quiet again. You stay in the water a little longer than you need to before finally letting your maids finish up. After the bath, your maids help you put on a plain sleeping robe and you make your way to bed. Your maid checks the brazier one last time and she will make sure that it stays burning throughout the night. By the time you're actually in bed, the palace has gone really quiet. Most of the palace gates are locked up by this hour, and there shouldn't be anyone left moving about in the palace now. Well, except for the guards and the eunuch patrols keeping watch for fire throughout the night. It's been a long day. One by one, the lamps around the courtyard begin to go out, and you're asleep before the last lamp does. What you couldn't have known that day is what was still ahead for the two women who shared a palace with you. Noble Lady Li would continue to gain favor and live out the rest of her life as a senior consort. And Noble Lady Lan would go even further, eventually becoming Empress Dowager Cixi, and would effectively rule the Qing Dynasty for over 40 years. But stories like theirs were rare. Most consorts never rose at all. Most just lived out quiet, repetitive lives inside these walls, year after year. Everything in a consort's life was carefully controlled, and everything was provided for. A life of rules. But once you were in the palace, there was no way out of it. What do you think about this kind of life? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
Stay curious, stay magical.